I was 72 years old when my son looked me in the eye and decided my life was over. Not because I was sick, not because I couldn't cook, clean, or walk, but because I was inconvenient. "You're too old to live alone, Mom," he said, standing in the living room I had paid off with 38 years of nursing shifts. Too old. Funny how I wasn't too old when I babysat his children for free. Funny how I wasn't too old when I lent him money for his failing business. Funny how I wasn't too old when I signed the mortgage papers back in 1989 after his father died and everyone told me I wouldn't make it. But suddenly I was too old to decide where I lived. And that's when I realized something terrifying. This wasn't concern. This was positioning. He wasn't planning to protect me. He was planning to replace me. And I decided that day I would never let my own son turn me into a guest in my own life. So I sold the house without telling him. And what happened next? He never saw it coming. The first red flag wasn't loud. It was subtle. He started coming over more often, not with groceries, not with flowers, with paperwork. "Mom, we should simplify things." Simplify, that word. It sounds kind, it sounds thoughtful, but it really means sign this before you ask questions. He talked about assisted living. He talked about safety. He talked about what if you fall. I asked him, "Have I fallen?" He said, "Not yet." Not yet. The fear tactic, the future threat. Urgency planted without proof. I saw it in his wife's eyes too, that quiet calculation. They weren't worried about me being alone. They were worried about the house being alone. 3 bedrooms, corner lot, property value rising, paid off, no debt, no leverage, except me. And suddenly, I was the obstacle. Here's what they didn't know. I may be 72, but I raised 2 children on 1 salary after their father died. I survived bankruptcy threats. I survived grief. I survived loneliness. You don't get to my age by being naive. You get here by reading people before they read you. So I stopped arguing. I nodded. I smiled. I let him think I was scared. And that was my pattern interrupt. Because people reveal their true plans when they think you're weak. He began pushing harder. "Mom, the house is just too much for you. It would be easier if we handled your finances. We could move you closer to us." Closer to them or closer to control? I asked him one question. If I move, who owns the house? He hesitated, just for a second, but that second told me everything. "Well, we'd probably sell it." Probably. Not "we'll keep it for you." Not "we'll rent it so you have income." Sell it. And suddenly the urgency made sense. Interest rates were climbing. Property prices were peaking. He didn't want to protect me. He didn't want to miss the market. And he didn't want to share it later. That night I couldn't sleep. Not because I was afraid of being alone, but because I realized something worse. My son thought I was already gone. In his mind, I was a liability with a pulse, and that hurt more than any fall ever could. But here's the thing about pain. It either breaks you or it wakes you up. And I woke up. The next morning I called a realtor. Not one he knew, not one in our neighborhood. Someone discreet, professional, sharp. When she came over, she didn't look at me like I was fragile. She looked at me like I was a client. That mattered. I told her I wanted to sell, fast, quietly, no yard sign, private listing. She raised an eyebrow. Family situation? I smiled. Something like that. She nodded. No judgment, just strategy. Within 2 weeks, I had 3 offers, all above asking. Cash buyers, no contingencies. The market was hot. My timing was perfect. The universe rewards the prepared, and I signed the papers without telling my son a word. But I didn't just sell. That would be predictable. I did something smarter. I bought a small condo near the ocean. 1 bedroom, balcony, walking distance to cafes, community events, other people my age who still laughed loudly. Not an assisted living facility, a living facility. And I paid cash. No one could touch it. No co-signers, no shared ownership. Just me, the woman who was supposedly too old. Now here's where it gets interesting. My son showed up 3 days before closing, unannounced. He brought documents again. Mom, we really need to finalize your move. I let him talk. I let him build momentum. He started outlining plans. We found a great senior community. We'll handle the sale of the house. We already spoke to someone without asking me. And that was the moment the mask slipped. He wasn't suggesting, he was arranging. And he assumed I would comply. That assumption, that's where he lost. I waited until he finished. Then I said calmly, that won't be necessary. He frowned. What do you mean? I handed him a folder, closing documents, transfer of ownership, deposit receipt. He stared at the signature, my signature. What is this? I looked at him the same way I used to when he lied about homework. I sold the house. Silence, real silence, the kind that sucks oxygen out of the room. You what? I sold it. His face drained. When? 2 weeks ago. Why didn't you tell me? Because you were never asking. You were planning. But I didn't say that. I said something simpler. It was my house. His wife called me later that night, angry, accusing. How could you make such a huge decision alone? Alone. Interesting word choice. I lived alone, paid alone, maintained alone, but I wasn't allowed to decide alone? That's when I understood something deeper. They didn't see me as independent. They saw me as inheritance. And I had just removed myself from the estate plan they wrote in their heads. But here's the payoff. I didn't just protect my home, I protected my dignity. Because aging isn't losing control, it's watching who tries to take it. A week later, I moved into my condo. The first morning there, I drank coffee on the balcony. Ocean breeze, sunlight, no tension, no whispers about my condition, just peace. And for the first time in months, I felt young, not in body, in power. My son didn't speak to me for 3 weeks. Social proof works both ways. He expected guilt. He expected me to panic and call him. I didn't. And that silence unsettled him more than any argument could. Because when control fails, ego scrambles. Eventually he visited. Different tone, softer. He looked around the condo, small, cozy, happy. You seem good. I smiled. I am. He sat down. No paperwork this time, just questions. And that's when I decided the final move. I've updated my will. His eyes flickered. Curiosity, fear, hope. I've created a trust for your children's education. Relief washed over him. Then I continued. But everything else goes to a women's housing charity. Shock, visible, immediate. Why would you do that? I held his gaze. Because security should belong to people who respect it. And there it was, the lesson, the reversal, the consequence, not screamed, delivered. He didn't argue, because deep down he knew. This wasn't revenge fueled by anger. It was clarity fueled by experience. You cannot rush someone into irrelevance and expect a reward. You cannot treat a mother like an asset and expect gratitude. And you cannot mistake age for weakness. Here's what nobody tells you about getting older. You stop fearing loneliness. You start fearing disrespect. And once you choose dignity over approval, everything shifts. Now I volunteer twice a week. I joined a book club. I made friends who don't talk about me like I'm a liability. I walk by the ocean every morning. And sometimes I think about that sentence. You're too old to live alone. Maybe I am too old to tolerate manipulation, too old to ignore red flags, too old to let anyone rewrite my ending. If you're watching this and someone has started managing your life without asking, listen carefully. Concern explains. Control pressures. Love includes. Entitlement assumes. Know the difference. And never sign anything out of fear. My son still visits, more respectful now, less certain. He learned something that day. So did I. Family doesn't guarantee loyalty, but boundaries guarantee peace, and peace is worth more than property. I wasn't too old to live alone. I was too aware to live controlled, and that made all the difference. If this story made you think, pause for a second. How many decisions in your life are truly yours? And how many are shaped by someone else's urgency? Think about it. Because sometimes the greatest comeback isn't loud, it's legal and final.